One of the biggest moments to rock the true crime community, it's about to happen this week. Several outlets reporting that the suspected Long Island serial killer, 6'4" architect from Long Island, New York, Rex Heuermann, that guy right there, he's expected to plead guilty to the deaths of 7 women. Here they are. Initially, he was charged with the deaths of 3 women: Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. Then he was charged with 4 more: Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Sandra Costilla, Jessica Taylor, and Valerie Mack.
In December of 2010, their bodies were recovered. They were buried in a similar fashion, in a similar location, in a similar way. All the women were petite. They all did the same thing for a living. They all advertised the same way. And there were similarities with regard to the crime scenes.
Heuermann claimed that he was innocent. He pleaded not guilty to all the charges. He was set to go to trial in September. He wanted to go to trial, according to his defense team. So why now? Why change his mind, if this reporting is correct? Why change his plea to guilty? Are there more victims out there?
100%. I mean, he's going to admit to killing 7. There's no way there's only 7 victims. Not a chance.
But also, Matt, when we look at numerics of the astonishing number of people that these individuals are alleged to have killed, would we ever fully know? Would we ever really get the validity and the specificity that we need? I always find that questionable.
So to help break it all down, I have some very special guests to talk about the case. I have a criminologist, Dr. Debbie Goodman. She profiles people like this. I also have a CSI, investigator, Sheryl Mack McCollum, and a friend of the program. She's going to break down what she thinks about this sudden change of plea, change of heart. And you know what? This is a case that is also very dear to my heart. I have covered it since the beginning. I've been in court with this guy when he towers over everybody, stared at myself, gave me the chills, and everybody else in that courtroom. I've been to his place of work. I've talked to people that worked near him. That's where he was taken down in Manhattan. I've been to his house when they were taking evidence out. And I've been to the scene of the crime, according to prosecutors. So we have a lot to talk about and a lot to break down as we're approaching some of the biggest news in true crime happening this week. But first, do me a favor. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, ring the bell. I'll tell you about some live events that are coming up. And share this episode with a friend. Let's bring that true crime family back together. That's what doing this is all about. Now the case against this guy, Rex Heuermann. So joining us in the conversation, we have crime scene investigator and author of Swans Don't Swim in the Sewer is Sheryl McCollum, one of my friends, your friend, True Crime Fam. All right, when we're talking about this dirtbag, Rex Heuermann, what are your initial thoughts on this case that he's going to be changing his plea, according to reports?
I called it from day one. When I knew when he first got locked up, he reached out to the smiley face killer. I thought, that's all I got to know. You are so arrogant. He reminded me of BTK and Koberger. And I thought, he will never go to trial. He doesn't want to look weak. He doesn't want people to know just how twisted he is. He wants to be in charge of how this story is narrated. So he's not going to let them do it. He's not going to let them put up experts and evidence and talk about him when he can't respond.
Yeah, this is a type of serial killer that loved the attention. They found clippings in his home along with other items that were confiscated that were very strange, including the life-size doll. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
But it appeared that he really loved the news coverage and kind of playing cat and mouse, which was the MO, if I remember correctly, of BTK.
Listen, there were a lot of similarities. You can't deny it. He thinks he's the smartest person in the room. He's able to get away with this. Again, you and I have talked about it before. because there's no connection to the victims. The victims know numerous people. They go somewhere just because somebody calls them and says, hey, meet me here. So he's also a pretty lazy serial killer. The victims came to him. He didn't have to hunt. He didn't have to work. He didn't have to kidnap. They were easily overpowered by him. They did not know what was coming. Only he did. So he got them to a remote place, and then he did what he did. And, remember on his computer when he had the blueprint for the killings? He told us exactly how he did it. He's going to clean the bodies. He's going to destroy evidence, and he's going to keep the noise to a minimum. So then you think, oh man, didn't he build some kind of soundproof room in his house that nobody was allowed to go in but him? And then he had all these things. You mentioned the doll. Do you remember the Playboy magazine? It was in one of the tubs they were bringing out that was clear. That was the issue that depicted Marilyn Monroe's, suicide. Well, as you know, when she died, she was nude. So to him, again, that's porn on a different level. He liked torture porn. So what that tells you is what he did to these victims, because he didn't have them for 10 minutes. He had them for hours and hours, if not some of them days.
Are there more victims out there?
100%. I mean, he's going to admit to killing 7. There's no way there's only 7 victims. Not a chance.
Why plead guilty now? He's taking a page out of Kohberger on this one, who didn't go to trial and saved his own butt by not facing that firing squad like he should have. And then Kohberger didn't even give a statement in elocution, any sort of explanation or any statement.
Yeah, that blew my mind. At least BTK admitted to what he did. And I think that needs to be the case here at a minimum. I don't think you should just be able to say, yeah, I did it, but let's not talk about it. Because I think law enforcement needs to talk about it. Law enforcement needs to learn from it. The general public needs to learn from it. There's a reason a lot of these serial killers, snatch people that are sex workers or homeless, because they're unknown, they're unseen, nobody's looking for them. In this case, we had families that were, regardless of what they did for a living. And that helped keep this case in the news. But look how long it took before law enforcement would admit they had a serial killer. Everybody in the country, novices, 3rd grade teachers were saying, it's clearly a serial killer, but they didn't even want to admit it. Then you find out their chief of police was involved in doing things that weren't on the up and up when it came to sex workers. So, you had a lot going on in this neighborhood. There's no question.
What are we going to see at that change of plea? Do you think that Wifey Poo is going to be there? Did she know?
I think she has to be there. She's been standing beside him. I think she's got some kind of deal with Netflix or somebody. So I think she's got to see it through. I think she's got to show up because that'll be their final, scene, right? Do I think she knew? Matt, I don't know how she didn't know some things. And let me be clear. Do I think she knew that he was a serial killer to this level? No. Do I think she knew that belt? Yes. Yes. They moved more than one time. They weren't living together when they first met. There's no way his brother did not know that belt. So there's things that I think were probably a clue to her, like when he wanted to build a room inside their home that she wasn't allowed to go into. Matt, come on. That's a clue for anybody. And I mean, I understand everybody's relationship and marriage and whatnot is different. But if you start telling me you're going to build a room in my home that I cannot go into, I'm going in that room, baby, as quick as I can, because there's something not right. There's no reason for you to keep something from me at that magnitude. And then you're thinking 7 cell phones, all these devices, all these different laptops and computers. He's an architect and your house is falling down. Nothing about this added up. There's no way it added up to her.
And I've been to that home. We've talked about it offline before. I've been to that community. It is like storybook community, it's something out of a movie. There's flags on everybody's doorstep, American flag. There's people mowing, grilling out. It's just, Pleasantville. And then you get to his house and it's the Munsters' house. It's just completely bizarre. In a lot of the situations, we see the houses torn down, like with John Wayne Gacy. We saw that with the Idaho 4. That house was torn down. This house might be torn down. Are we going to discover more evidence?
It's a good possibility. I mean, if he built a room, who's to say he didn't lay concrete? I don't know. But you're talking about a man, if he started killing in his 20s or 30s, he had a lot of time, and he did not do this part-time. I say this all the time, but there is no such thing as a part-time serial killer, and there's no such thing as a part-time child molester. They are constantly driving around, looking for a body disposal site, looking for a good place to take a victim to attack them. They are constantly looking at porn or something that they perceive to be porn. They are getting something from whatever it is they're watching and searching for online. They spend a great deal of their day doing those things. He worked probably very little. He spent time with his family very little. He probably couldn't wait for them to get to Iceland. And then it was full-time serial killing stuff, whether it's researching, ordering things, going and getting some burlap, doing something to, in the truck to make it easier to transport, whatever, getting another cell phone, whatever he was doing, it was for serial killing.
Sheryl, it's always great to get your insight about these things, as frightening as your answers might be. Thank you for being here. How do we get a hold of you? How do we follow you?
You can follow me on any social media platform. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, anywhere. And just follow me, message me. I love to hear from people.
All right. Thank you. We hope to see you back soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Joining in the conversation, we have Dr. Debbie Goodman, who is a criminologist, author, professor, and part of the True Crime fam. Thank you for being here. First question to you is going to be your reaction to this change in plea with this accused serial killer.
Wow, Matt. Well, as always, such a pleasure to join you, and thank you for inviting me for the conversation. My reaction is very similar to what the reaction was when we heard that Bryan Kohberger was going to plead guilty. So I am somewhat surprised, but not 100% so. And here's why. Because what ends up happening with these people, Matt, and when I say these people, I'm referring to serial and mass murderers. Now, technically, they are in different categories. The two individuals with whom we'll be having the conversation about today, but clearly Rex Heuermann is categorized as a serial murderer, alleged. Why? Because that would speak to individuals who kill 3, 4, or more individuals over a period of time at different locations. Now, Bryan Kohberger, technically in criminology, we would refer to him as a mass murderer. Why? Because the configuration for him slightly different. Still, the numerics are the same, 3, 4, or more deaths, but it's at the same time at the same location. And so I would tell you that I'm surprised. Why? Because if we look at personality traits, we look at qualities of both of whom, I would, as a criminologist, say both are narcissistic, they're grandiose, they're manipulative. And I do believe both thought that they would get away with it. Now, interestingly, the time frames, of course, are somewhat different, meaning with what Rex Heuermann, we were almost at the 2-decade mark in terms of when his crimes were alleged to have occurred until the point in time of his arrest. Now, Bryan Kohberger, of course, we were looking more along the lines of a 6-week time frame whereby the crime occurred, his arrest, and then, of course, for nearly 3 years, he was maintaining his innocence. So I think that could be a good start to our conversation.
Yeah, and when we're speaking of Kohberger, who is a confessed killer, I was in court with him as well when he changed his plea. So he didn't go to trial on the eve of trial. And then also thinking back to Dennis Rader, BTK, He also pled guilty to some of his crimes. He gave a statement in elocution. He had to admit to his crimes to avoid death. Kohberger didn't have to do that. What do we think for this guy?
Yeah, those are great analogies. See, I like the idea of some type of rationale explanation. You know, the bottom line is whatever these atrocious killers tell us, they've done such heinous actions. But at some level, everybody wants to know the why. When it came to Kohberger and my discussions with, colleagues on the media, I created a theory called JAR. Jealousy, anger, revenge. I think that's what drove Kohberger. I think individually and collectively, he was jealous of Maddie Cayley, Ethan Zana. I think that angered him, his place in life at the time, 28 years old, no real intimate relationship, nor, as far as we know, did he have any platonic relationship, and ultimately took revenge. Now, as you suggest, Dennis Rader did make a statement as to why. I'd like to hear from Rex Heuermann. I actually don't think it'll happen. And here's why. Unless the judge is really making that a foundation for the entrance of the statement for the plea, I think many of these individuals, Matt, the serial killers, the mass murderers, they're really all about what I also refer to as CPA, control, power, authority. I can assure you that any name we would list in this classification, these people think they're getting away with it. They're pathological liars. They're very manipulative. They're involved in concealment. They do their actions in privacy. And yet, what's also very startling to me, and I'm sure to your true crime family, is just how, intellectual at times they could be. Meaning, how is it that they could be seemingly normal for part of the day, let's say, and then completely, camouflage and become these altered people and personalities? So that's also another very stunning area, I think, in these conversations. But to answer the original question, I really don't see Rex Heuermann giving us any kind of information as to why all of this took place.
Do you think that, there are additional crimes out there that he committed that maybe we're not going to know about? Or if he does give a statement, maybe there's going to be a bombshell and he'll drop more names of victims?
Right. See, that's always the curious moment, even when Kohberger was happening and my students and true crime family and such asking me, well, Dr. Debbie, do you think Kohberger actually committed other crimes and yet he may have gotten away with it? I definitely think that's possible. But also, Matt, when we look at numerics of the astonishing number of people that these individuals are alleged to have killed, would we ever fully know? Would we ever really get the validity and the specificity that we need? I always find that questionable. But when it comes to Rex Heuermann, I think what's potentially going to happen here is that he will likely plead guilty to the 4, right? That was the original alignment of him to 4 victims, the Gilgo 4. But we also know there were 3 other victims aligned with him. So potentially, could he plead guilty to all 7? But I don't think it stops there. Why? Because, as you certainly know, very well versed on the case and involved, and the true crime community and family members know, that there were also remains of another potentially 4 people on the Gilgo Beach in Long Island. So in totality, that could be 11 individuals.
Yeah, this is a case that has really fascinated everybody, and it's terrorized that community. Here's some video that I shot when I was at the court during one of the briefings after one of the hearings, because there was no cameras allowed inside, right? But there was still photographers. Why do you think this case has really gripped the nation the way that it has?
Yeah, I think because of the levels and layers. First, we start with an individual who's an architect, who's married, who has 2 children, living in New York. That could seemingly be any normal person. And then it's as if this switch has been flipped and we've got somebody who has, as you said, and I'll echo your word, really terrorized a community, a state, and then the world until, this case went on almost 2 decades, of course, before we had the arrest. So I think it becomes very compelling. One murder is one too many, right? For years, we're discussing a singular homicide, a double, triple, quadruple, school-based, workplace-based, family-based, serial and mass murder. So I think no matter what category of murder we're talking about, it becomes very fascinating to people. It becomes very intriguing, and we all want to know why. Why would this individual, who was leading a seemingly normal life as an architect, had a wife, had children, and then seemingly is now potentially about to tell us that he's guilty of anywhere from 4, 7 to 11 murders?
Do you expect his wife to be present at court? I have seen her a few times there, and I spoke with her initially after the arrest, and I'll play that for you, but do you expect to see her in court?
I think she might be there in court. It's interesting because he's not the only one who was married, who had children. I think for some of whom there may still be a connection. Why the connection? Because they have children together. But is there any type of, concern of what did they miss? How did I miss it? That's another curious point to this whole puzzle. How is it that the spouses don't know? And how is it that one could literally be living with a murderer, like the saying, the stranger beside me? How is it that the person that a spouse that one is most intimate with, emotionally, physically, intellectually, and then seemingly doesn't know? But I think she might be there.
Yeah, and and some of the evidence that was pulled out of the home, according to investigators, it include research of killing methods. There was that locked room. There was more than 300 guns or weapons that were confiscated from the home, several phones he had associated with him, a life-size doll. There was a lot of questionable items, and then the DNA linking him to the initial arrests. And then, investigators said that he had methodically planned, excruciating in detail. He used a document planning the crimes with columns such as problems that included DNA, tire marks, and blood stains. So when you hear those things, I think that that's the reason why a lot of people that may have contact with these animals are questioned as to whether or not they noticed anything out of the ordinary. Your thoughts?
Right. Yeah, no, that's all great information that you present. And it again raises this alarming question mark about how is it that you live with a person and you don't question this like secretive basement and areas that individuals are researching and these burner phones and potentially 300 weapons. It's very unusual, but in many of these cases where spouses are interviewed, and even when adult children are interviewed, and they also maintain that they just didn't know. They actually describe their parents as very involved and very doting on them, particularly throughout their growth and development. So I think sometimes, Matt, people can be in denial, right? And the forensic aspect of all of this. Can somebody have that, something just doesn't look right, sound right, feel right approach to their loved one, but then for whatever reason, they want to kind of push it away and brush it under the carpet and say, well, you know what? He's a good husband. He's a good father. Maybe there's some behavior that's curious, but let me not rock the boat. And I think that's potentially what we might be looking at here. See, other conversations I've had with the media, they've asked, well, do I think that perhaps the wife was a co-defendant? I really don't think so. I don't think she participated.
Yeah, and to your point, she's been cleared. She was investigated along with the rest of the family. She's facing no charges. She filed for divorce. She's separated from him. She claims that she didn't know anything. But I did speak with her from the sidewalk after his initial arrest. I want to play that for you and get your reaction.
What you see, right? It is what it is.
How's your children doing?
Not gonna indulge in that one. Not going there.
Have you spoken to your husband?
And I'm not going there either. That's already been, his lawyer's already answered that question.
Okay, so she lawyered up right away, and this is before she initially started having conversations with him because she signed a documentary deal where she visited him in jail and she started attending the court hearings. At one point in time, I believe she said that she didn't think that he did it. What is the family dynamic going through when someone's facing such terrible allegations or when they admit to the crime, which we may see happen?
Right. Well, interestingly, we have a theory in criminology, and we call it differential association theory. So what that really speaks to is exactly what your question is presenting, because the different people with whom we associate and their actions dramatically impact us. So again, the wife could be a very nice person, a very involved person in community, have nothing at all to do with crime or criminality, and the same thing for the children. But now what happens? All of a sudden, the worldwide spotlight is also on them. And even though they've done nothing wrong, truly, Matt, as we would understand, they too are in trauma. They're in crisis. The reaction and response from the world is just absolute horror and terror, and therefore they too are looked at differently. So I would understand and appreciate as a criminologist why the wife and the mom is immediately, disassociating. She doesn't want any affiliation, and I'm sure she still wants to maintain some level of a quality life and lifestyle, as with the children. So she doesn't want to answer questions directly, perhaps, about him, about her kids, because the likelihood is this does become a lifelong turmoil, and it's almost like their own status and their reputation becomes tainted. Unfortunately so. They did nothing wrong directly, but the mere last name, the mere association and affiliation becomes a very difficult black cloud to escape from.
Yeah. And, it makes me also wonder, too. This is video I also shot during that visit. Asa Ellerup said that I could go read the note on the door, which included the attorney information at that point in time. But it's also very interesting to me, just the reaction in the neighborhood, because it's such a quaint, beautiful little neighborhood. Everyone has flags. Everyone's pushing babies, grilling out in the front yard. And then you have this house that is just so out of place, owned by this architect. And, you would almost think, the neighbors on the left or the right or his coworkers may know something or have suspected something. Again, how do we not notice something sooner if you're seeing images like that, or if someone's just very odd? I mean, I guess that's the big question.
Yeah, well, again, Matt, at times I do say that these people are seemingly hiding in plain view. We go back to Kohberger for a moment. Now, he's an individual who was, of all things, studying criminology at a high academic level. People did feel that he was odd. He was somehow, peculiar, bizarre. I think those were some of the words that were used to describe him. But was he really thought to be a potential mass murderer? See, I think with Kohberger, if he doesn't get caught, Matt, he does become the serial killer. I think he was on his way toward becoming a serial killer. I think he was utilizing the platform of crime and criminology to really study and do his own deep dive about these mass and serial killers. And that's what he aspired to do, unlike what most people aspire to do when they're studying, crime, law, justice, criminology, criminal justice. They want to be involved in, contributing well to society. FBI, DEA, Customs, Marshals, Secret Service, Homeland Security. But he had his own agenda. Now we go to Heuermann. Seemingly this architect, people at some level must have respected him, must have appreciated his intellect, and yes, seemingly a productive member of society contributing. So might the neighbors have thought, well, gee, why is this house, somewhat in disarray and not quite as neat and tidy as the other homes? Well, but he's a smart architect, so we'll kind of let it go. And I think that's sometimes the mentality. People just do not expect an individual that they go to work with, that they interact with, that they see at the grocery store, and who lives in their neighborhood to potentially be a serial or mass killer.
So why now? If he does in fact plead guilty, we know with Kohberger he was facing a firing squad had he been convicted. So, that was motivation for him. Dennis Rader, he had to give the statement in elocution, so he was facing death. With Rex Heuermann, he was approaching his trial as well. Why now? Is he wanting to stay relevant in the headlines? There was reporting that, he really loved following news stories about his crimes, alleged crimes, and newspaper clippings, and he would call to see if there's tips or search. Does he just want to stay relevant?
I think in part, Matt, because going back to all three, I think all three, meaning Dennis Rader, Rex Heuermann, Brian Kohberger, all three like the media attention, but believe it or not, that's not uncommon among serial mass murderers. Why? Because at some level, they're seemingly, with intellect, and they will read, whether it's the newspaper back in, Raiders' day, or be all over social media and TV platforms and podcasts. Remember, Brian Kohberger was really following the podcasts and the media, and he enjoyed that. And so what we could, kind of call that is the hedonism. You see, hedonistic killers that I think the three names mentioned, what's really happening is they're deriving pleasure from everything and anything involving the crime, from A to Z. The preceding, when they think about it, that's giving them pleasure. When they're actually making the plan, like you suggested with Heuermann, he's got this plan and how to carry it out. And I believe the same thing with Kohberger. All of this gives them great pride and great pleasure. And every day that goes by that they're not caught, for them, that's also quite the accomplishment, because ultimately they begin to believe they've gotten away with the whole thing. So yes, I think all three like to be relevant. It's that grandiosity and narcissism that's feeding into anytime they're reading their name in the print and hearing it on TV and people are talking about them. They really do enjoy that. So yes, I think that's the answer, but I'll just put one more answer to that, like the part A, part B. And the part B is, I also think it's the control aspect. You see, as you mentioned, Kohberger and Rader, they're facing the death penalty. And isn't that ironic that they're able to kill people, but yet when it comes to their own punishment, they don't want to seemingly die. Now, we know that with Heuermann, New York does not have the death penalty, but the control piece that I think is potentially important to him, he wants to control where he goes. My evaluation of New York state prisons, it's probably one of three, and I'm sure he's discussing that with his attorney, and he will want to go to one that he feels maybe is safe for him, one that may offer a medicinal program. If as he's aging, he'll get better health care. So I really think it's also for him a control aspect. He wants to be involved in where he gets sent to prison.
You are a world-renowned voice in criminology, and you study killers, and you've probably spoken to many and studied so many. What would you ask him if you have the opportunity to be face-to-face with him?
Oh, wow. See, that even gave me chills, Matt, just thinking about the question. But I will tell you that the one question I always want an answer to, and seemingly we really never get the answer, but I would want to know why. Why would he do this? Why would he take the lives of these innocent women and leave this atrocious, void in so many families' lives? So for me, that's the overarching question to any mass murderer, serial killer. Why did you do it?
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. You are so insightful and just really make me think about so many new things with these horrific events, but you always put it in such an understandable way, and you always make me feel better about the world a little bit. So thank you.
You're great. Well, you know how highly I think of you, and I'm so excited for your podcast, and I know the success is going to be enormous. And you deserve it, and people love you. So this is the right thing at the right time.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Matt.
I do hope that we get some answers, and I hope that this is the beginning of closure for some of those victims' families out there. And I hope some of the other families do get answers as well. Anybody with any information in the Gilgo Beach murders case, please call the FBI or call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-220-TIPS. You can remain anonymous. All right, take care of yourself. We'll see you next time.